I'll call this meeting of the Finance and Labor Relations Subcommittee to order. Declarations of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Seeing none. Item 3, delegations. 3.1, delegation by Paul Roth, Oxford Carriage Limited. Could I get a motion for that? Councillor Ritzma, all those in favor? Carried. Mr. Roth, are you there?
I am.
Go ahead, you've got the floor.
Okay, well, I think our letter was self-explanatory. We felt the delay in reassessing our property taxes of 3 years was unreasonable, a little long. If we found out within 6 months that our taxes went up $800 a month, we could have found ways around that. But now, all of a sudden, after 2 tough years, coming up with $30,000 is going to be difficult, to say the least. So we had 2 options. I mean, the first option, just forgive 2/3 of it. I know that's a lot to ask, but it's been a tough 2 years, and we could come up with $9,000 or whatever. The other one is, if it took 3 years to give us the reassessment, give us 3 years to pay it without paying interest. Let's us spread it out and make it a little more manageable. So I don't know. I don't think I have anything more to add than that, unless you have questions about it.
Oh, okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Roth? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 4.1. Tax relief request for supplemental billing issued by the city. Does anyone wish to make a motion on this item? Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I've got a question of staff. When they say options, refer the customer to the assessment review board to determine if they meet the eligibility requirements for a claim on the municipal act. Is there any chance that would help in a situation or not?
Thank you through the chair. That particular clause under the Municipal Act relates to specifically to extreme sickness or poverty, and it's very stringent regulation to qualify. But it's something that if the ratepayer would like to pursue it, then certainly we can support that and refer them over. It does involve, I'm going to say, a sharing of a lot of personal information in order for them to make that assessment, but it does remain an option available to them if they're so inclined to pursue that.
Councillor Clifford.
I have a follow-up. Because of COVID, is COVID an exception? I know we talked about this the other day, but obviously what's in his correspondence here, it talks about COVID and whatnot. Is that a legitimate exception?
Through the chair, so there isn't any provision for that exception through our own internal, I'll say, policies or management of tax collection, and through the assessment review board. I guess potentially it would be really difficult to comment on the exact circumstances of the applicant, but I suppose if that COVID had created a situation such that they fell within the definitions of the extreme definitions, then I suppose that could have an impact, but I don't believe that COVID is explicitly addressed anywhere under any of the policies. We certainly have had, obviously, a lot of people impacted by COVID, not just this particular person. So it's something that, if council wants to explore options for COVID-related relief, then that would likely impact many, many other ratepayers as well.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone wish to make a motion? Councillor Clifford.
I'll make a motion that we file the request.
Any questions on that motion? Then I will call the question. All those in favor?
Support.
Thank you, Councillor Beatty. Item 5, report of the Stratford Economic Enterprise Development Corporation, 5.1. Would anyone like to make the motion to hear from Ms. Gerber? Councillor Ritzma, all those in favor?
Support.
Go ahead, Joni.
Thank you so much. It's nice to see everyone today. Through the chair, you have a report in front of you that summarizes the activities of the last quarter of Invest Stratford and looks forward and ahead a little bit into some of the work that we'll continue to do as the year comes to a close. So very quickly, I wanted to let you know, as we often do, where the city-owned parcels of land sit. So they are all sold or reserved in the Wright Business Park. 1 of 4 in the Crane West Business Park has been sold, and the other 3 lots are in reserve. There are 3 active inquiries and ongoing interests from companies seeking industrial land. As we know, the smaller parcels remain in high demand, and the work continues to act as matchmaker to make sure that our companies are attached closely to privately held property owners to ensure that they have some options. One of the things that we did in 2021 was to reach out to our existing large employers. We had a 50% response rate, which as an overachiever feels low to me, but I'm told from people that do this kind of data analysis, 50% response in an online survey is pretty good. So I'll take that. 13 of the 26 surveys were returned. And I wanted to share this with the committee. The majority of the respondents recommend Stratford as a good place to invest. More than 60% plan to expand their operations within the next 12 months. And I just want to highlight that for members of the subcommittee. This means that our companies are growing, they're hiring more people, they're expanding on their existing footprint. And what we do know of the city-owned parcels in the Wright Business Park, 75% of those land sales have been to existing companies, homegrown companies that have grown and outgrown their existing space. So we know that growth is coming. 77% of respondents rate Stratford's location and quality of life and community an 8 out of 10 or higher. Quality of life, location, and the community asset is one of the greatest benefits to the attraction work that Invest Stratford does. As you all know, in Ontario, there are very, very strict municipal laws around bonusing and incentive. And so often our sales pitch is really about the quality of life in Stratford and what a company does and its employees do after the sort of 7 to 3 shift. And to see here that the majority of our respondents rate Stratford in those areas a greater than 80% is something that we should all be proud of. And it would be remiss not to point out the operating challenges from our survey respondents being available workforce and housing, and of course, high cost of energy ranking the highest operating challenges. And we hear those challenges from across the province. Stratford is certainly not alone in its workforce and housing, and energy rates are provincially set. And so we work really hard to help our companies connect directly with the team from Festival Hydro, who I see you'll hear from a little bit later. And I'm going to speak a little bit about the work we're trying to do on housing and workforce development as well. So you've got a map there. I like pictures. It highlights the state of the lands that are currently owned by the city, reserved and sold in both the Crane and Wright Business Park. Very quickly, with respect to entrepreneurship and small business, the Starter Company Grant Program began in November. So this means $30,000 will be invested into local businesses. I want this committee to hear me highlight that while the province gives us or transfer payments us the grant money itself, the work that the City of Stratford and the funds that the City of Stratford contribute to the Small Business Enterprise Center directly impact that funding going into the community. So I think that council and this committee takes the credit, if you will, for making sure that these funds get put into local entrepreneurs who are starting their businesses, growing their businesses, and improving their businesses. So we're really proud of that. And just a very briefly, a couple of our strategic partnerships and community development. So we're working very closely with our partners with respect to Connect to Skills. That's where we're helping individuals who maybe need a little bit of sort of on-the-job training, really partner with our employers, both industrial, construction, and hospitality, to get experience, hopefully leading to long-term employment. We did submit an application to the Provincial Rural Economic Development Program to fund the financial modeling and incentive toolkit from the Stratford Roadmap for Attainable Housing project. So our fingers are crossed that that funding will come in and we can keep moving on the recommendations from the Attainable Housing report. And of course, we did submit a My Main Street program grant to that program that would see us hopefully be in receipt of funding for businesses in the downtown core of both Stratford and St. Mary's. So this is one of those opportunities where we've leveraged the strong partnerships between the two communities for resources and for grant funding. So I'll leave it there, and through you, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions any members may have. Turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Joni. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Bunting.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Joni, just a little, excuse my ignorance here. When it shows the Wright Business Park, Barnesdale Street, and there's three small sections on the, I guess it would be the north side of the street, indicated, and I'm just sort of confuses me. Are they separate lots or what's that about? And then there's a couple of solds there. I don't know if those lines mean something or not.
So through you, the chair, my apologies. Those lines are just a function of the PDF system cutting and pasting where it shouldn't have. Lot 4 is the square where Southwest Vets exists. And the back end of that, the sort of rectangle with an extra slice in it, it shouldn't have, is the portion of lands that they had under option that has been approved for their expansion. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I apologize.
No, it's just that I thought it's strange, and I figured that might be the case, but I wasn't sure.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, Joni, I was going to ask, in your survey, you talk about high cost of energy. And as you mentioned, that's right across Ontario, but are they comparing with Quebec with electricity in Manitoba or Ohio? Like, I'm just curious I mean, if they said something, is there anything we can, like, how do we help them if it's a province-wide problem?
So a number of years ago, and I mean, I'd be happy to defer some of the specifics on the program to the two hydro experts that you have. But a number of years ago, there were many conservation programs. There were some grants and offsets for many of our larger users that supported some of the bottom line costs. Those either expired or went away, depending upon the government of the day at the provincial level. At a competitive level, Ontario as a location is often compared to our partners in the US, Quebec as well. And generally speaking, energy and workforce are just top 1, 2, sometimes lease and maintenance costs on the pro forma of our industrial clients. I know that that Jeff and his team have been looking very closely at all sorts of global adjustment supports. You know, I think COVID sort of slowed down our ability to kind of get that information into our industrial partners. But we're going to ramp that back up again and make sure that they know if there's anything on the table that they're perhaps not taking advantage of, that they should be. But ultimately, I think, Councillor Clifford, you know, overall, that cost continues to rise. And my experience has often been that give me some problems that I can fix. And that one's a tricky one, to your point.
Councillor Clifford.
And I was just going to ask, and we've talked about this a lot, about the workforce and housing. It seems to me, but I'd like to be corrected if I'm wrong, if someone builds a factory here and someone lives in Kitchener or London or Tempsford or Mitchell, regardless if we have housing here, are people not driving? Like, and I know you mentioned the other day the cost of driving, which I never thought of that before, the cost of gas. So is it really the biggest biggest problem as we're talking about here? Or is it something that can be solved by if employers have to pay more money or whatever? But I'm just curious, like, I don't see how we can solve this within 5 years, for instance, because houses aren't being built that quickly.
So yes, through the chair, I think there's a lot to unpack there, and you raised some very good points. What we know about the commuter radius, as our HR professionals refer to it, is it's about 60 minutes at its furthest for our basic production workers. I don't mean the word basic to be derogatory in any way. I just mean the sort of early entry production work. And the reason being is exactly to your point, the cost of driving, the cost of vehicle maintenance. I mean, gas is now $1.45 a liter. That's going to continue to shrink that commuter radius. And what our employers are telling us is that they can get individuals to make that drive while they're still looking for employment closer to home. And so what happens is they'll start working for you, and then they'll get a job offer closer to home, and they'll snap it up, because 25 or 30 cents an hour makes a big difference when you're not spending 60 minutes in your car and all the associated costs. Now, with respect to housing, what our employers are telling us is that they can do the outreach. So they're happy to do the trade shows or the job fairs and really start to pull from a larger distance. The challenge will always be where those individuals will live. Many of our employers have started to get very creative. They're looking at, do we buy an apartment building? Do we create temporary housing? Work with landowners in other ways? Because the idea of their employees planting roots here is really, really challenged when there aren't places for those individuals to live. So it's a very complex problem. I think you're probably, I hope you're not right in 5 years, but it's probably 2.5 to 3 that we're really going to see a significant decrease. But 3% unemployment was the rate for Stratford and Bruce Peninsula at the end of October, and that is 0. So there are at least 500 jobs available right now in this community and its surrounding area. And it is one of the biggest challenges that our employers are facing. How we get creative to solve it, I think, is going to take not only municipal, provincial, and federal supports at all the levels, and also some creativity. And we do encourage our employers to get a little bit more aggressive in their salaries and their compensation. And I think, just sort of watching their social media channels, we're seeing them use social media far more than, the old traditional ways of looking for people. They're using Facebook and Indeed and all of these other tools in order to try to drive new talent, benefits immediately upon start, profit sharing, all of those things that for many years in the industry never needed to worry about or to really get aggressive on. So that is an ongoing reminder as well. And it is for sure something that we let our employers know. Now, those who have decision-making at HQ far outside of Stratford, have their hands tied a little bit. But I think the United Way has done a great job with some of their living wage stuff, and the communication is happening. I'm not sure if it's 18 months, 24 months, or 60, but I hope we've got some solutions around the bend.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for Joni? Then I will entertain a motion on receiving this report. Councillor Bunting. All those in favor?
Support.
Carried. Thanks, Joni.
Thank you.
Item 6.1, Destination Stratford third quarter update. Can I get a motion to hear from Zach? Moved by
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Beatty. Thank you. All those in favor?
Support.
Carried. Go ahead, Zach.
Thank you. So through the chair, I'm just going to try to share my screen and have a bit of a brief presentation and update for you here. So as I try to do at each of these quarterly updates, I will talk about our recent efforts in destination marketing, destination development, and destination management all separately. But before I do, a quick financial snapshot. We are on track for meeting our budget in a net neutral way. This is a couple of weeks out of date, but we're now in the 90% range of revenues received and the mid 80% range for budgeted expenses, so right on track. So in terms of destination marketing, hopefully some of you have seen a bunch of the campaigns that we've been up to. To date, we've launched over 29 separate campaigns. There's a lot of numbers here, which I won't bother going through, but in terms of performance, extremely proud of the work that the marketing team has done. We continue to represent this destination and work within the confines of safely and prudently marketing the destination to the region and further afield as the pandemic conditions allow us to. Here's us back in Toronto and Dundas Square, in this case, in the late summer, showcasing Stratford al fresco. And we will be back in Dundas Square in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks to further showcase Stratford through Lights on Stratford. So unlike last year, we have been able to do some serious marketing and cast our net further afield, and it's been to great effect. So in terms of a few highlights for destination development, al fresco was a big success, and for the purposes of today's presentation, al fresco will be just about the Market Square, Tom Patterson Island, and Memorial Garden picnic table areas, so not including the boardwalk extensions and bump outs, but just the main al fresco locations generated over $750,000 of direct impact. They were really essential at various points throughout the summer where there was no capacity allowed within restaurants, and this was a pressure valve. But it has turned into its own type of marketing destination effort. And we are seeing a significant uptake in it. In particular, we see Market Square busier during the day and Tom Patterson Island busier during the evening. It's also really interesting to reflect on some of the non-monetary benefits. There's a really important tourism ambassador impact with having staff in a public space like Market Square for such great length. There's also been a really important function in terms of social services involving de-escalation, maintaining a safe public space. And I have met recently with community services and others just to try to collectively and collaboratively work on some of the social issues that we are seeing more prominently currently, such as homelessness and some mental health issues. I'm very pleased to report that there's been no issues around the alcohol bylaw pilot project for the second year. And I will be coming back before council, hopefully in December or early in the new year with a full report and some recommendations for council to consider moving forward with this program. Also very proud to share with you that Destination Stratford won a provincial award. This was for Lights on Stratford last year and innovation. So it's nice that you don't hear it just from myself, but that there's some third-party validation in terms of some of the work that we're doing flowing from the Economic Recovery Task Force and through Destination Stratford. So Lights on Stratford is almost here upon us. It's just over 4 weeks away. The city has been a great partner. This is a greater context of opportunity for us to really explore and demonstrate that winter tourism is possible in this destination, and in fact is a economic priority that we are pursuing with great gusto. I'm very pleased that local tourism businesses are stepping up and supporting us, both as sponsors, but also by keeping their lights on while we bring lights on to the community. So there are a lot of accommodation partners who are doing packages, a lot of restaurants and cafes who are extending their hours. So we can really make these 6 weeks impactful and demonstrate that we have something here to offer in the winter in a serious way for tourism. Our culinary trails continue to set new records. We are on track for doing the most sales ever this year, which again is quite remarkable. We had periods of time where we weren't able to have them at all. So again, layering in these experiences for our visitors to come, especially in these uncertain times when some of our main events are not possible or are diminished in terms of capacity, has proven to be extremely important. So our self-guided audio walking tours are also really successful. Again, these are free. These came as a pandemic response, but will be here for many years to come. There's over 300 spots at this point, and we've had over 8,500 tours happen so far this year. And about 2/3 of those are in market, and 1/3 is from home, and in some instances from exotic countries all around the world. As I mentioned last time I was before this committee, a priority is sport tourism moving forward. And one of the subsectors that we're starting with is cycle tourism. So we've worked with St. Mary's, Perth County, Cycle Stratford, and the city to start seriously promoting cycle tourism and growing its infrastructure. Here you can see the Perth County cycling tour from earlier this year. It sold out and could have doubled, according to the organizers, in terms of participants. And you should have all received, hopefully, a package at one point that we sent out, including our new map. Again, this is in collaboration with Perth County and St. Mary's. And we're already collaborating, again, in terms of advertising and making this a county-wide effort to really be impactful. So moving on to destination management, a few highlights. This project involving the Stay Safe Rapid COVID tests, it has wrapped up with Communitech and Invest Stratford. We were able to distribute over 40,000 tests locally here for free to local businesses. And the Stratford and District Chamber of Commerce has now have a supply and their own program. So we've got a transition for our local community so people can continue with this important program. As my colleague Joni mentioned earlier, the United Way and the Living Wage initiative, we feel really importantly in the hospitality sector to lead by example. So we've registered and we are at the champion level, and this covers our full staff, including summer students, et cetera, to make sure that we are a living wage employer. And our industry has suffered a bit of a reputational damage over the last number of months during the pandemic. So it really is critical in terms of making sure we have enough staff. And Joni already spoke eloquently about some of the challenges around staffing issues. So I won't go into that anymore, but we do need to see a shift in the industry to attract staff, retain them, and make sure that staff shortages aren't getting in the way of our economic recovery. Tourism infrastructure, I like to share this image of destination marketing dollars going towards fixing plumbing and adding infrastructure into our public spaces, because we see that as a really critical investment in making sure that tourism can be strong and continue to grow. So in terms of grants, I can share with you that we have secured just under $300,000 grant for a boathouse public washroom expansion. And I will share with you briefly some of those plans in a moment. Included within that grant, we were able to get $40,000 for alfresco cost recovery. And working with our partners such as Invest Stratford and City Centre BIA and RTO4 was the only way that we could deliver alfresco this year. So I just wanted to highlight that it was a collaborative effort and required some one-time grant monies that we won't have access to moving into the future. We were also awarded just under $200,000 for Lights On through the Provincial Reconnect Grant. And we are awaiting several other grants that we have applied for 2021 activities. And I'll be back in touch, hopefully, with some positive news about those soon. So I want to quickly highlight the work that's happening at the boathouse, just so that you're aware. We're in the design phase and the early stages. This is the boathouse as it currently is with a tourism kiosk, and Destination Stratford is working with the city to transform this into a year-round bathroom facility with increased capacity. So here is the current design, and we're trying to make this as future-proof and friendly as possible. There's a real focus on accessibility. So there's a full universal washroom contained within this design, as well as enhanced areas for the women's washroom and men's washroom. The universal is family-friendly, gender-neutral. So this really ups our game in terms of public washrooms within the city, which is really critical for tourism growth, but also for quality of life for our community. So on that note, I wanted to close this presentation with a graphic that we developed to help explain why, as a destination marketing organization, we focus so much on destination development and management, and why it's a great value in terms of investment. So when we develop in tourism infrastructure, we're trying to enhance the visitor's experience. We're trying to also improve our community for local residents, and we're trying to have economic growth. The projects that we embark on try to do all of these and wrap them into one. So if it's from the boathouse public washroom that we're spending a lot of resource and time and effort on, to things like Lights on Stratford, to add new experiences, to turn our tourism industry into a viable year-round industry for support of local business, to al fresco. All of these have long lifetime value and try to excel in each of these 4 areas. So I just wanted to share that with you because it's hard to explain why we do destination development and management within tourism. And with that, I would welcome any questions.
Councilor Ritzman.
Not so much a question, but a comment. Certainly your last point around washroom upgrades, you know, as a pre-pandemic traveler, one of your basic needs in travel is the washroom experience. And certainly that is key, you know, for travelers to know they have a safe and accessible washroom facility. So bravo on that enterprise. I think that's essential in our community in promotion of tourism. So well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment and a question. I believe the infrastructure on Tom Patterson, that was great. I was out there after they had a heavy rain, and it was like, it was a lake. So this is really good. So I commend you on cleaning that up. My other question is just, and it's really interesting when I went through this about the trails and your campaigns and all the stuff that we do like in the shoulder season, which I think is really great. But I just want to know what your relation is with the festival, because in my opinion, it brings majority of people, and even I, as an entrepreneur, I'm affected by the festival a lot, like with bed and breakfast and all the things. So what kind of connection do you have is like with the festivals outreach and our outreach? Is there a connection or isn't there a connection?
Yes, it's something that we actively work on in terms of maintaining that strategic relationship and growing it. So we do several collaborative marketing efforts. In particular, we are connected strongly with their marketing department. So as an example, for Lights on Stratford, Stratford Festival, which is, as you mentioned, an enormous marketing machine and a tourism draw, we'll be using some of that marketing heft to assist us in growing Lights on Stratford as a wintertime activity that they also see value in the community. During the year and during the summer, we closely collaborate to help promote each other and all the various activities. So I think it's a very symbiotic relationship, and one strengthens the other. So from a major tourism draw such as the Stratford Festival, the destination also has to be working well and provide lots of vibrant activities and have a strong culinary sector and have accommodation options, et cetera. So that's where the symbiosis happens, and that we stay closely connected to make sure that we are, to our mutual benefit, working together and collaborating.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Councillor Bunting.
Yeah, more of a comment. I just wanted to advise Zach that I got a call today from a very avid pickleballer who is currently looking at a tournament in the spring, which would has the potential of attracting over 300 people to the community for maybe a long weekend or whatever. I'm not sure of the timing of things, but it's coming down the pipe, so you can expect a call on that one. I think it's great that the bicycle thing, hopefully next year it will double, and sports tourism is definitely an area that needs to be explored. We can't just rely on the festival. The festival is great, the festival theater, that is, but they certainly bring people to the community. But as last year proved, when there were very few, last season, very few shows, the year before, zero, we still had people coming to Stratford, mostly day trippers, but at the same time, some people staying over. Those are my
So through the chair, I really appreciate you making that comment. We are very keen on growing sport tourism as an opportunity to further diversify. And Stratford has a very unique cultural reputation, number of room nights, et cetera, to be a perfect fit for a certain size of a sport venue, sport event. We're meeting later the next week about some curling and other opportunities. So what's happened thus far has largely been haphazard or just landed in our lap. There hasn't been a lot of intention, and we recognize that. So as we grow sport tourism, we will be looking for opportunities and some grant funding opportunities in particular to help us as we grow these opportunities and really go get them and bring them to Stratford in an intentional way. Obviously, shoulder season would be the preference in terms of when room nights are available and capacity exists. So that will be where we will start to train our focus. And we hope in 2022 to bring even more events here.
Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Zach, we talk about we don't have the housing here for people for jobs. Do we have the hotels and the bed and breakfast and the short-term accommodations? Is like, it seems to me when a play's over, I see a lot of people driving out of the city. Is that a problem, or is that my imagination?
Well, it's not a problem over the last year and a half because of the pandemic, but it will be a problem as we come back to where we were. So we will have a shrunken number of room nights in the city. The recent direction in terms of reducing the number of short-term rentals, which is, I admit, a very complicated issue in terms of affordable housing and housing stock, et cetera. But in terms of tourism recovery, not having enough room nights and bumping up against capacity is something I expect us to see quite regularly, potentially as early as next summer, or if I have anything to say about it this winter. But we do recognize that as a bottleneck into our economic recovery. In order for a hotel or someone with a lot of rooms to come in, we need to demonstrate that we're a year-round viable tourism economy. It's very difficult to look at the value proposition with only 4 months of very busy demand. So we're doing everything we can to diversify that throughout the year, have the tourism draw be substantial, increase the number of sport tourism events, et cetera. But also we do need flexible options like short-term rentals, bed and breakfasts, et cetera, especially to handle when we are at capacity. For everyone that doesn't stay, typically we're losing about 80% of the spend. They spend money the next day, they stay longer. And in a lot of cases, especially with people that are fans of short-term rentals, they won't come to destinations that don't have any availability or that option. So that is a concern that we are keeping an eye on and trying to mitigate as best as we can as we continue to go through economic recovery.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Then I will entertain a motion to receive the report. Councillor Bunting. All those in favor?
Support.
Carried. Thanks, Zach. Item 7, report of Festival Hydro Inc. and Festival Hydro Services Inc. Could I get a motion to hear from, I'm sure Allison's going to do most of the talking, but I see Jeff's here too, Councillor Bunting. All those in favor? Thank you. So go ahead with whoever's going to speak. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and your insight is incredible. I will defer to Allison, the CFO of Festival Hydro, to deliver the report.
Perfect. Okay, so just a couple highlights. I'm going to give the highlights of both FHI and FHSI, but if you have any specific questions, feel free to ask. Starting with FHI, our net income for the period up to September 30th is just over 1.5 million. It's 73,000 below our year-to-date budget. However, this is a significant improvement from our Q2 results. If I go to the balance sheet, our accounts receivable balance is 190,000 more than it was in September of 2020, and 1.4 million higher than June 2021. This is mainly due to the increase in usage by all customers through the summer months, so our customer bills have increased. However, this only will impact our current AR balances, and it's to be noted that the accounts in arrears greater than 90 days has actually decreased by 70,000 compared to the prior year. Another point I'd like to note is our unbilled revenue, which is energy that was consumed through the month of September that has not yet been billed as of September 30th. This balance is 485,000 lower than the previous year. Although usage has increased, our global adjustment rate has significantly decreased compared to the prior year, which has caused the lower quarter end balance. Another point I'd like to note is our long-term debt. Our Infrastructure Ontario loans that were to end in 2025 were paid out early at the end of August. This was done in order to decrease our reporting requirements and terminate some of our restrictive financing terms with Infrastructure Ontario. This loan has subsequently been replaced with commercial debt in November. Basically, it's a wash for our financial impact in terms of interest, but it's much better from an administrative perspective. If I move to the income statement, our distribution revenue has increased by 20,000 compared to our budget and 308,000 ahead of prior year. Main increase being due to residential customer growth. And this offset some of the reduction in revenues of our larger commercial customers who sustained impacts from the government lockdowns earlier in the year. Our controllable costs have decreased by 174,000, the majority of this being due to staffing vacancies, specifically in our senior leadership positions. Our cash flows have improved throughout 2021. Our average overdraft balance has decreased from 2 million that was in 2020 to an average of 888,000 in 2021. And lastly, we are on side with all loan covenants for this organization. Are there any questions related to FHI financials?
Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I have a general question. I'm in the HVAC business, and it hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen very quickly, that people are going to be changing from natural gas to electricity. And the other thing that's going to happen, we all know, like EV, like electric vehicles are coming very quickly. So I have two questions. I know our income is down now, but in my mind, and I'd be correct, I could be corrected, I think our income is going to be up. And do we have the infrastructure to support? Like I have an example. I have a customer that's got a natural gas furnace it's fairly new, but he's a staunch environmentalist. He's taken that out. He's putting an air-to-air heat pump. He's taking his hot water, gas hot water. He's putting an electric hot water. And as we know, all kinds of people are going to need like 200 amps instead of 100 amps in their house because of EV. Do we have the infrastructure, and are we anticipating extra income in the near future because of the changes? So I'm curious about your comments on that.
Yeah, so I'll provide comments first on the revenue side, and then I'll let Jeff take the question on capacity. From a revenue perspective, for residential customers, it's a fixed income for us per month. So we don't actually earn any more money dependent on how much is used for residential customers. For business customers, if you know, the usage increases, we will receive additional financing. We haven't seen major impacts yet of electrification, but I'm sure that especially as you mentioned, things are starting to move. We're getting that early adopter stage, and we will see probably some additional customers move towards that, but we're monitoring that all of the time. But like I mentioned, if it's a residential service where it's just moving from 100 amp to 200 amp, we likely will not see additional revenues unless we change our go in for another rate application, which would then incur those additional costs and therefore increases rates. Jeff, I'll just pass on to you for the other component.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been working with a lot of industry stakeholder groups, et cetera, in terms of planning for capacity upgrades.
We need to have you turn your volume up, Jeff.
Kind of quiet, Jeff.
How about I speak a little bit louder? Does that help a bit? We're working with a number of industry groups. Is that a little bit better? To make sure that we understand some of the additional capacity that we can expect in future years. We're working with, for example, the ESA to get some reporting on electric vehicle charger installations in residential properties. We've done some analysis on our system. We have 2 stations that feed the city of Stratford. There is capacity existing in both stations. Typically, if there's going to be a service upgrade at a commercial or industrial establishment, there'll be some contact with our engineering department. We'll look at the transformation capacity, et cetera, in the area, and we'll do some assessments at the time when we have a better idea of what the load upgrades are going to be. So we have a lot of mechanisms in place, and we do have a lot of capacity availability in the city. So I feel pretty comfortable that we can support the future.
Thank you, Jeff. Councilor Bunting.
Yeah, just a question for Jeff with respect to the substation at Devon Street. I was looking for a ball one day, and I happened to notice a lot of activity in that area. Can you just sort of tell me what all that was about? It looked like a fairly substantial work being done there, to me anyways.
Yeah, sure. I can give you a quick update. Hydro One is currently doing a transformer replacement. It's called a Devon station. There's basically two transformers that supply secondary bus at that station. So one half of that station is out of service for a couple of weeks, while the Hydro One replaces a transformer that's just nearing end of life. It's a planned renewal, planned upgrade.
Yeah, I just wondered if it was an expansion as opposed to obviously you said it's replacement.
Yeah, there's no additional capacity. It's basically a like for like in terms of the size of transformation.
Thank you.
It's just a bigger footprint because they've expanded the size of the fencing, the perimeter of their fencing, I think. I think I was with you when you hit that golf ball into the back of the hydro station, Graham.
I'm not aware of any change in the footprint. We're sort of not privy to the details of their design.
Yes. Festival Hydro is the enemy. Okay, if there's nothing else on that report, Allison, do you want to give us part two?
Sure.
Thanks.
So FHSI, not a huge update to give you, but I will give a few highlights. Our net income for the period was 106,000, 5K below budget and 42,000 lower than at this point last year. From a capital perspective, we're 42% of budget spent. The main decreases are due to some staffing vacancies and limitations on that team, as well as some supply chain challenges that we've had receiving some equipment that we've sourced from different locations, and just the slowdown due to the pandemic. We're seeing some supply chain issues. From the income statement side, our revenues are 70,000 lower than budget, but 13,000 higher than our prior year. The reason for the decrease is mainly due to slower than expected growth on the Wi-Fi and ISP revenues. Also, our consulting revenues that are service to Festival Hydro is low compared to budget. Again, this is mainly relating to some of the staffing vacancies that we had through this year. But those are also offset by the reduction in the staffing costs incorporated into the operating expenses. Again, similar to what I would have provided in my last report on Q2. Our cash flows have remained steady and stable through 2021, and we do not have any compliance issues with our banks. That's my update.
Excellent, thanks. Anybody have any questions? Councilor Clifford.
Yeah, I'm not sure about dark fiber, but is it growing, dark fiber? I know when I was on the board, it was a big part of Rhizome. Is dark fiber, is it growing? Is there opportunities to grow opportunities to grow in that area, or is what it is?
There are some opportunities. We're reviewing that now. There's quite a bit of fiber in the city of Stratford now with Whiteman's Fiber to the Home project. We're looking at both renewal and growth where there is customer opportunities.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to receive those two reports. Councilor Ritzma. All those in favor?
Support.
Carried. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Allison. Item 8, Manager of Financial Services. Q3 operating budget variance report as at September 30th, 2021. I think Spencer is, no?
I can take that.
Carmen's going to take care of that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gaffney. So the most of the variances that we're seeing in the department and division operations have been highlighted within the report. So I won't go through those specifically, but I will sort of highlight in the table in the report where we're forecasting, surpluses and deficits and that sort of thing. And just a bit of an update. This report was prepared at September 30th based on our best information at that point, where we were forecasting a $9,000 deficit. However, things change throughout the year, and where possible, staff are reducing spending where they can see that happening. So as of right now, we aren't anticipating a deficit. We think it'll be fairly close to the line, but maybe a slight surplus by the end of the year. We have a lot of capital transactions still to process and a lot of our year-end entries, which is why we're sitting at a $21 million swing the other way. So I can certainly answer any specific questions if anybody has any, but it's as expected. There's no surprises really in what we're seeing in the operations, and we're just trying to kind of keep up with some of the past, the previous year finance and accounting for 2020 and get moving forward into 2021 as well.
Excellent. Anybody have any questions on this report? See none, I'll entertain a motion to receive the report.
I'll move that.
Councillor Clifford, I got first. All those in favor?
Support.
That's carried. Thanks, Carmen. Item 9, report of the city clerk, 2022 council committee and subcommittee meeting schedule. Tatiana, you're there. Go ahead.
Through the chair, each year the clerk is required to prepare a draft meeting schedule for consideration. And the schedule takes into account a number of items, including holidays and to COVID. The schedule has been attached to your agenda, and the biggest difference from prior years is the recommendation to continue with electronic only meetings until April or until all restrictions related to the pandemic are lifted. Following that, we would return to our regular in-person meetings in council chamber at their regular start time. We are seeking direction to adopt the schedule subject to any required amendments, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions besides me? Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I have a question. In April, if they say we're half open, like I know we talk about March, but we don't know what's going to happen. Is there a hybrid thing we're thinking of that we could get back and not back, or it's if we can't get into the council chamber, because you know I don't think it's black and white, quite frankly, and I know you talked about that depending on, but I know other councils have got back together and are getting back together, and I'm okay till the end of March, but I think by that time it would be good if we had council in person.
So through the chair, as noted in the report, any hybrid model would still require participation by all members of council to be on a computer with Zoom and with headphones. That's just to ensure members of the public could see the councillors, could see how votes were being taken, and then could hear the discussion. Because we have such a large council, if social distancing is still required, we would need individual cameras because we wouldn't be able to capture that number of council plus loop in the public, which would still be on Zoom. So there is always an opportunity if we can bring councillors in, but again, you would still be participating through your computer with a headset. And that is why we're recommending continuing electronic only until all restrictions are lifted.
Okay, thank you. My question is, and one of the perspectives I bring this from is, and I'd like to see how serious council is about our stand on the environment, that things like public meetings, subcommittee meetings, we're asking 10 people plus staff to drive into downtown Stratford and sometimes have a meeting. And I see we got a couple public meetings coming up here in the fall that probably aren't going to last more than 10 minutes. So we're expending an awful lot of resources to get to a meeting that only lasts for a few minutes. So I would wonder about looking into, after the pandemic is over and after all the restrictions are lifted, we still have all our regular council meetings in person, but maybe look at something different for subcommittee meetings and public meetings and things like that. Because so it's just something I want to throw out there and see how council feels about that. So, Council Ritzman.
I will move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'll call the question, and all those in favor?
Support.
Carried. Thanks, Tatiana. Item 10, Report of the Acting Director of Corporate Services, 10.1. Any, go ahead, Carmen.
I just don't have a lot to offer with this, but this is just an update from the boards. I just wanted to open up the floor though. If there are any specific questions that we can take back, we absolutely will do that.
Does anybody have any questions on any of the advisory committee reports? Then I will entertain a motion to receive for information.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Councillor Beatty. All those in favor?
Support.
Carried. Item 11, advisory committee outside board minutes. We have one from Stratford's of the World. Next subcommittee meeting, January 2022. Before we leave, does anybody have anything else they would like to discuss or introduce to the subcommittee while we're here? Okay, see none. Item 13, adjournment. Moved by Councillor Bunting. All those in favor?
Support.
Carried. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.